Community Council webpage in the future. And so, Valerie, if you haven't already, please make sure that's recording. And then I'd like to turn it over to Jan Lindstrom, our secretary, for minutes and membership update.
Hello, everyone. Well, I do not have minutes to put in front of you because I didn't get them done fast enough to email them out ahead of time, but I am going to post them tonight on the website and send them out via email. And then if anyone has corrections or changes, if they could email them back, and I'll put all that in there. And apologies for getting so behind with the minutes. My OneDrive is not syncing, and I made multiple versions, none of which were the correct ones, and so I had to kind of recreate things from scratch. It's user error, to be sure, but they could make it easier, I'm just saying. Working on my desktop and my laptop is something new with this Zoom stuff. So anyway, in terms of attendance, though, we did have at our last meeting 26 members, 3 non-members, and 6 visitors. So we are holding our attendance pretty well via Zoom and actually getting a lot more non-voting members to participate. So we have been talking as a board about looking at ways to add Zoom, even when, knock on wood, we can get back together in person, that we could keep that going for people that have a hard time showing up in person. So that's encouraging. And that's it for now.
Awesome, thanks, Jan. And Jane, did you want to give the treasurer report, just the actual numbers to read into the record?
Yes, the actual number remaining the same was $2,032.38. No money in, no money out.
Would you be willing to let people know how they could make donations to us in the meantime?
Well, how would you want to do that? I suppose anyone could send a monetary donation to the address of the community council, which is Joseph's address.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that the credit union allowed direct donations to nonprofits like ours.
Probably would. You could probably go to the On Point Credit Union right here on the corner of McLaughlin and Oak Grove Boulevard and make a donation. Just tell them you want to make it to the Oak Grove Community Council. They would be able to find our account. They're willing to take money at any time.
Awesome. Thanks, Jane. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our Vice Chair, Valerie Chapman, for our feature presentation for the evening. This is a conversation that we wanted to bring to you last month, but we needed to take a little extra time. And this issue is no less relevant this month than it was last month. So we're happy to bring this to you. Valerie, please take it away.
Okay. Well, we're going to try something a little different tonight. In light of the national conversation regarding race, we're hoping to begin a community conversation that will lead us toward more diverse engagement in our community. So to begin the conversation, we're going to show a short video talk by Dr. Robin DeAngelo, and we will show the video in 2 parts with some time for comments after each segment. So I want to thank you in advance for participating, but let me give you a little background about Dr. DeAngelo. She is a PhD, consultant, educator, and facilitator on issues of racial and social justice, and she's been doing that for more than 20 years. She's worked with a wide range of private, nonprofit, and government organizations. She received her PhD in multicultural education from the University of Washington in 2004 and earned her tenure at Westfield State University in Massachusetts, and she currently serves as an affiliate associate professor of education at the University of Washington. In 2011, she coined the term white fragility in an academic article, which influenced the international dialogue on race. So her book, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, debuted on the New York Times bestseller list in June of 2018, and it remained there for 85 weeks. So we are, now this is an experiment for us to be showing video. And what I want to ask people is, if you're not muted, except for Greg, please don't mute Greg, because Greg's going to be showing the video. Mute yourself to help us to have the quality of sound that we would like to have. So with that, Greg.
Thumbs up if it's working.
No sound. We do not have sound, Greg. Or captions. So we need sound and captions.
Sound.
Hmm?
I didn't have race. I was socialized to see race as individual acts of discrimination and prejudice, individual acts that anybody could do to anybody else, and if you did those acts, you were a bad person. And that is why, since I saw myself as a good person, I didn't see myself as connected to racism, and certainly didn't see myself as connected to race. In other words, I didn't have a sense of a racial identity. Today, I understand that I move through the world always and most particularly as a white person. I have a white frame of reference and I have a white experience. And part of being white is to have that.
We're not seeing the video, Greg. We're just seeing your desktop.
Live.
Okay, well, let's stop this for a minute and go back.
We could hear the sound perfect that time, but couldn't see it.
Well, crap. Okay, share computer sound, optimize screen sharing for video clip, screen 2,
Do you think recording it could be
share.
off? I would like turn off the recording while the video's on and turn it back on.
Is that working?
There we go.
Yes?
I'm Dr. Robin
good.
D'Angelo, and
Good.
my work
Thanks, Greg.
focuses on the question of what does it mean to be white in a society that proclaims race meaningless, yet is profoundly separated by race. And to start this off, I want to draw your attention to the fact that I'm white. So just look at me for a moment, think about it, notice it. And part of being white is that is a very uncomfortable thing for me to do. And it's taken me many, many years to be able to draw people's attention to my race and see any significance in it. And that's because as a white person, I was socialized to see race as what they had. I was just a person. I was just a white bread, a Heinz 57. I didn't have race. I was socialized to see race as individual acts of discrimination and prejudice, individual acts that anybody could do to anybody else, and if you did those acts, you were a bad person. And that is why, since I saw myself as a good person, I didn't see myself as connected to racism, and certainly didn't see myself as connected to race. In other words, I didn't have a sense of a racial identity. Today, I understand that I move through the world always and most particularly as a white person. I have a white frame of reference and I have a white experience. And part of being white is to have that be invisible to us and to be able to live our lives without ever acknowledging that, to see that as non-operative. I now understand racism as a system, as a deeply embedded system, a system that our country was founded on and that all our institutions were created out of. And every institution reinforces this system. And it's a system of unequal power. So let me give you an example. Women in the United States got the right to vote in 1920. And there was only one possible way that we could have gotten the right to vote, and that was for men to give it to us, because we literally were not sitting in the seats of institutional power. We could not give ourselves the right to vote. That doesn't mean that we couldn't have personal power, but we didn't have institutional power. And that's the difference between a system and individual acts. Prior to women's suffrage, I could certainly discriminate against men, I could be unfair to individual men, but my group could not systematically deny men as a group the right to vote. And men controlled all the institutions, and they all worked together to convey the message that women's place was here and men's place was there. And that's the difference between individual prejudice and a system of inequality. So in this field, we think about oppression, or in this case racism, as group prejudice backed by institutional power. And so prior to the civil rights movement, it was fairly socially acceptable for white people to just come out and say, we are superior. But post-civil rights, it became bad to be racist, right? It became unacceptable to be racist. And that seems like a positive thing, right? Racism's bad. But unfortunately, what it morphed into is to make it impossible for white people to look at racism, because what we hear is, I would have to be a bad person in order to perpetuate racism. It became a moral issue. In addition to years of reflection and study of my own racial identity and how it shapes my life and my experience and my perspectives, I've had the very rare opportunity to, for a living, day in and day out, lead primarily white groups of people in discussions of race and racism. And there are some very, very predictable patterns that come up in these conversations. And as I listen to these, it's almost like a script. And as I listen to white folks, my group, repeat these narratives over and over, I got this image of a dock, like a pier, and it's just floating on the water, and that's all the superficial things that we say. And you probably recognize some of these, you hear them, maybe you've said them yourself. I don't see color. I was taught to treat everybody the same. I don't care if you're pink, blue, purple, polka dotted. My parents weren't racist, that's why I'm not racist. Or my parents were racist, that's why I'm not racist. It doesn't really matter what goes in front of it. The answer is always, I'm not racist. I know people of color. I used to work in the military. All of the things we say to rationalize that we ourselves are not complicit in this system. Now, I want to speak to two of these before I kind of take us below the surface of the dock. And one is this idea that our parents taught us to treat everyone the same. And I am just going to put it out there like this. No, they didn't. That is not humanly possible. Human beings are not objective. You cannot be taught to treat or to see everyone the same. And when you say that, you're indicating that you don't understand how socialization works, which is actually a positive thing in the sense that that can direct what you would need to focus on if you want to get deeper understanding. The other one I want to speak to is this common trope of, I don't care if you're pink, purple, polka dotted. If that's in your vocabulary, I would urge you to please drop it and never say it again. Although it isn't intentional, it's actually very demeaning. People don't come in those colors, and what it conveys is that you're not prepared to engage with authenticity. Okay? And that's why I have this image of a dock, right? That's very superficial surface. And for me, in trying to understand how all this works, what it means to be white, and live so separate by race, even though I was taught to see myself individually as open-minded and outside of all of this, I've had to go under the surface. And that's why I have this image here now of under the water. You see the pier, the pillars or posts that prop up the surface. Okay, so for example, it's very common in discussions of race to have white people tell you about all the people of color in their lives, right? Oh, I have these coworkers, or my best friend, or my second cousin married a black man, or all of the ways that we want everyone to know that we have relationships with people of color. Okay? And so we're giving you evidence right? When someone tells you that, they're giving you evidence. And so what are they giving you evidence of? They're giving you evidence that because they love people of color, know and love people of color, they can't be racist, which means they see racism as conscious dislike or explicit bias or hatred, right? And they're communicating to you that they don't have conscious dislike or hatred, as evidenced by all of these people in their lives. And what we don't understand is the power of implicit bias. Most bias is unconscious. And that makes it very, very dangerous because it drives our behaviors, but we're not aware of it. Yes, it's wonderful to have people of color in your life if you're white. Many, many, many people, white people, don't have people of color in close relationships. But that doesn't mean your life is free of racism. That doesn't mean you don't have a white experience or a white perspective. And it also doesn't mean that racism will not surface in your relationships with people of color. So if we go underneath and we look at the pillars that are supporting that kind of superficial ways that we're taught to think about racism, we see individualism as a very powerful prop or support, this idea that each of us is unique and outside of socialization. We see universalism, which is kind of the opposite of individualism. Individualism says, why can't we all be different? And universalism says, why can't we all be the same? This is a very popular ideology in religious or faith communities. And I'm not arguing that on a deep spiritual level, we're not all universally the same, but we don't live, if you will, in the spiritual realm. We live in the physical realm. And here in the physical realm, we have to ask ourselves, how does it function to say we all bleed under the skin? Well, it functions to take race off the table, to take power off the table, to deny that we have fundamentally different experiences, because racism is real. And while race isn't real, in other words, at the biological level, there is no real, true race or racial difference as we're taught to understand it, these very superficial signifiers of racial difference that allow us to categorize people, these are very real in their consequences for people's lives. And this insistence that we're all one doesn't allow us to engage with that social reality. I try to help white people see how race functions in our lives. And I try to move us away from the really obvious, evident examples, such as a racist joke or a racist action, or things that would be recognizable to everybody, right? The kinds of acts that cause people like me, well-meaning people like me, to say, I couldn't possibly be racist, I don't do those things. And I try to help white people understand racism as the very fabric of our society. Many people can recognize the explicit, kind of conscious dislike type of racism, racist jokes, racist expressions, the KKK. But I want to help white people see the everyday racism that's embedded and that we participate in.
Okay, we're going to take a break right there and allow ourselves an opportunity to comment. So before we do that, I'd like to give us a couple of guidelines. First of all, I'd like to invite you to keep your comments short. That is, 1 or 2 minutes, because we're only going to take 10 minutes for comments. And we want to do that so more people can participate. And the other thing is to please consider your own comment or your own reaction to the question, rather than trying to respond, especially responding negatively to anyone else's comment. So we're not set up tonight to really do cross conversation. Rather, what we hope is to start a community conversation that will continue after this meeting out in our community and help us and guide us as we go forward. So with that, I think between, is it Joseph and Jim are going to help us. If you have a comment that you would like to make, we have some questions that we're going to start with. Greg, do you want to pop those questions up?
That work?
Yep. So the question is, what part of Dr. D'Angelo's talk resonates with you? Or you could also address the question, how have your views of racial injustice shifted in the past month or two? So you can raise your hand, or you with if you know how to do that through Zoom, or you can actually raise your hand. And I see that Eleanor's iPad is raised. So if we can.
Hi. So thanks so much for these question prompts, Valerie, and thank you OGCC board for having this presentation. I am so excited to be hearing it. I would say that that image, that metaphor that Dr. D'Angelo showed of the dock with the piers underlining it, I think is a really, really helpful visual to help people understand that no matter where we're standing, we're being propped up by these piers of institutionalized racism. In the past month, I've done a lot of reading and listening to podcasts and conversations with people. And I think that image is really, really helpful to help in those conversations and in that understanding of no matter who we are, no matter what subjective belief system we have about ourselves, we're all standing on that dock and we are all held up by those piers of institutional racism. So to recognize that we're all in this, it isn't about how I feel about myself or what kind of person I think I am. The truth is that our system is racist and has been since the beginning. And it will continue to be so until we all work with a lot of consciousness to shift it. And it won't happen right away. It'll take some time. So again, thank you so much for bringing this conversation to the community.
Thanks, Eleanor. If you don't know how to raise your hand on the with the participant screen, you can actually just raise your hand and someone will notice that. People are keeping track.
Don't see them.
Hello.
Yeah, that's a good point Eleanor would make. I did like the doc visual. That does really resonate with me. And it does make a lot of sense. And it does, you know, capture what's actually happening, you know, because people are here, but they're deep down, like they're underneath the water. And yeah, I think we have been, racist has been around for centuries. And the only way for us to change it is for individuals to talk about it like we're doing now, and for the individuals to do something about their own issues with it. I mean, it has to be on an individual basis as well as a community basis.
Thank you. Greg, we might take the questions down. We'll remember those too and let people see each other as they're talking. That would maybe be easier to see them if they have a comment. Thank you.
Crickets. I hear crickets. Oh.
Jan.
Can you hear me? I can't tell if I'm muted or not muted.
Yep.
Yes? Okay.
We can hear you.
Well, I appreciate Valerie basically bringing this idea to us. And I am one of those people who recoiled at the idea of being called a racist because after all, I married a Navajo and many of my friends are Black and yada, yada, yada. But I never actually looked at the benefits to my life from institutional racism. And I've been doing a lot of genealogy. And if you go far back on one side of my family, you do find slave owners. And that's not a fun fact to find on Ancestry.com. And so I know that I have inherited, you know, I mean, there's many people that have screwed up and lost all the money, but I know that I have had benefits due to that kind of original sin, if you will, in my family, that they had free labor when they established their properties here. And, you know, there was a lot of racism in my family, and I felt personally like I had to marry every race, was what my mother said. You don't have to marry every race, Jan, to make it up to, you know. But I try to go out of my way, but, you know, I've never looked at my own benefit or the systemic nature of it in the way I have since watching this video. So anyway, I think it's really good.
Thanks, Jan.
Rita.
Susan.
I'll unmute myself and maybe I'll even put my video on since I finished eating dinner. Yeah, I really like Robin DiAngelo. Just as a side note, in the last few days, I've seen there's some criticism of her work, which I have not yet read, but I really relate to it. You know, the whole good, bad thing. I'm a good person, therefore I'm not racist, and that is a false premise to begin with. And in the last couple months, especially over June, there was a whole Google Doc, which I'd be happy to share if anyone is interested, of spending 10 minutes a day educating yourself, reading articles, watching podcasts, or taking an action. And so my consciousness is being raised. I'm, participating in Zoom groups discussing race and, taking action mostly around politics in the next election. But I do really appreciate DiAngelo and all her work. And thank you. I'm here because Jane invited me and let me know about the discussion, which is number one on my priority list right now.
Well, thank you. I think we have time just for one more quick comment. We're going
Susan
to,
has had her hand raised.
yeah, and Susan had her hand up. Here we go.
I'm just stunned yet again by how much our outlooks and perspectives are led by the media. We're currently very highly aware of injustice, of racial injustice and all the things that have gone on because the media is bringing it to our attention. Then those of us who are interested, we may go off and go deeper into it. But because institutionally it's been so far in the background, and because I've gotten lax and just started sitting there and watching the news, it's not how I used to be. And I'm finding that if I keep just watching the news, my mind is formed, my attitudes are formed by what I'm watching, whether it's for or against. That's what's filling me up. And I think it really behooves us to, and it's hard to get motivated sometimes to really get into it ourselves. Go read a book, go look at these podcasts, go talk to people, look at these Google Docs. I think it's really important, and it's very discouraging when you learn more and more about the history, but we each have to find our own way, I think, through to see where our own sense of racism really sits inside of us, and how do we get through that to move on to the next phase.
Thank you. So Greg, I think we need to move on to the second half so that we can.
Okay.
But I want to
Is it working?
I want to help white people see the everyday racism that's embedded and that we participate in. And I want to look at neighborhood and school segregation as an example. I'm going to start with this app here. These are the app's founders. It's a new app called The Sketch Factor. And what it does is when you go to a new city, you can put in where you are, and it tells you which neighborhoods to avoid because they're sketchy. And of course, sketchy is very much associated with race and class in the white mind. And so now we have the convenience of segregation through an app. We don't actually have to talk to other white people about, where are the good neighborhoods and the bad neighborhoods. And that good neighborhood, bad neighborhood, good schools, bad schools discourse is an example of new racism. I don't think it gets by anybody that is racially coded language. So this way we can come out and police those racial boundaries without ever kind of naming race. But we all know what we're talking about. And I think the most profound way that my life has been shaped by my race is through the power of segregation. Most white people do live in segregation. We choose that segregation, and in a lot of ways we celebrate it. What makes a school good and what makes a neighborhood good? Well, the absence of people of color. That is the way that white people measure the value of their neighborhoods and schools. And while we don't come out and name that, we all know what it is. And so I have had to think very deeply on what it means to have grown up in a primarily white neighborhood, to be born into, to go to school, to study, to learn, to play, to worship, to love, to work, and to die in segregation, and not have one single person who loved, mentored, or guided me convey that there was any loss. And I'm going to repeat that because I think it's very profound, and I really want us to sit with it. That I could live my whole life in segregation. In fact, if I followed the trajectory that my loving parents laid out for me in my good neighborhood and my good school and my good college and my good career, in which I would ideally rise to the top, I could easily never have any consistent, ongoing, authentic relationships with people of color, and not one person who guided me ever conveyed that there was loss. Just sit with that for a moment, that there is no inherent value in the perspectives or experiences of people of color. If my parents, if my schools, if my curriculum, if my teachers, if my government saw value in those perspectives, I would be given those perspectives, but I wasn't given those perspectives. And that shapes my relationships. It shapes what I care about. It shapes what I see, what I don't see, who I build my life with, and who I don't build my life with. And that is the level where we really need to look at race inside of us and with us. In the line of work that I do, it's a breakthrough if you can get white people to acknowledge that our race privileges us in this society, right? That is like the second coming, to get white folks to admit that we are privileged by our race. But even that begins to get superficial. And you'll hear white people say, just because of the color of my skin, you know, I have these things, as if this is just an accident that happens. And I want to take us deeper. I want to take us inside this skin. My psychosocial development was inculcated in the water of white supremacy. That is what I call this system. I don't mean the KKK. I mean a system in which whiteness and white people are central and seen as inherently superior to people of color. My personality was formed in that water. My worldview was formed in that water. I didn't choose it. It isn't my fault. I'm not racked with guilt about it, but I am responsible for changing it. Because the default of our society is the reproduction of racism. It's built into every system and every institution. And if we just live our lives and carry on in the most comfortable ways for us, we will necessarily reproduce it. There is no neutral space. Inaction is a form of action. One of the most effective adaptations of racism since the civil rights era is this idea of a racist is a bad person, and if you're not racist, you're a good person. What I call the good-bad binary. And we can all fill it in, right? So if you're racist, then you're prejudiced and mean-spirited and bigoted and ignorant and Southern and probably drive a pickup truck. So we got some classism in there, right? This is our racist. And if you're not racist, you're good and you're progressive and you're open-minded and you're educated and you're Northern. And this binary is probably the #1 construct that keeps racism today in place and makes it nearly impossible to talk to white people about racism. The defensiveness we have comes from this binary. What we hear is, you just said I was a bad person. And so this binary sets it up to be mutually exclusive. You cannot be a good person and be complicit with racism. So you'll notice in the news when racism gets talked about, they'll bring in the evidence they'll have to defend the person that's being accused of racism is, but he's a really nice person. Right? Because again, it's mutually exclusive. We have to understand racism as a system that we're all a part of. You know, I often, in my trainings, after I've kind of laid out kind of how racism works, I'll ask people of color, how often have you given white people feedback on our inevitable, unaware and unintentional, but inevitable racism, and have that go well for you? And, you know, there's eye rolls and laughter, and basically the answer is never. right? It's virtually impossible for people of color to give us feedback because that binary sets us up to defend, right? I must, at all costs, deflect and establish that I am not racist, right? And that makes it so that we can't examine the reality of the society that we live in. Right? And then I'll follow up and ask this question. So what would your daily life be like? This is a question I ask the people of color. If you could simply give us feedback when we step in it, which we inevitably will, and have us receive that with grace, reflect, and seek to do something different, what would your daily life be like? And recently, a man of color in the room, there was a pause, and then he said, it would be revolutionary. And I just want you to sit with that for a minute. Revolutionary, that white people would receive the feedback, reflect, and try to change our behavior. That would be a revolution. Returning to the pillars underneath the dock, now we can label them, right? So we have individualism, we have universalism, right? Individualism, why can't we all be different? Universalism, why can't we all be the same? They both function to take race off the table. We have internalized superiority that no white person can miss. It was not lost on me that fundamentally it is better to be white. I don't want that belief. I didn't ask for that belief, and I've committed my life to challenging it. But 24/7, that is what society reinforces for me. So internalized superiority is also one of the pillars. The good-bad binary is a very foundational pillar holding up new racism. And segregation, the power of segregation to keep this system in place. And for me, by identifying those pillars, it has helped guide me to then how would I challenge each of those things. And so I urge you to take this journey. It is lifelong. It won't be over in my lifetime. I will never be free of all of the investments in this system that I have that I can't see, but I have committed my life to doing my very best to continually challenge it. And I invite you and, in fact, urge you to do the same.
So we're going to open up for some comments, reflections by people again. We have some other questions to help us along.
So do you want the one about the statistics or?
Yeah, let's put that one up.
Okay, here we go. I think here we go. Hopefully here we go. Is that it?
No.
Exit full screen. Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so here it is. The Oak Grove community is majority white, but we also have like 10%, 10.2% Latinos, 1.4% Blacks, 3% Asian and Pacific Islanders combined, 1% Native American, 4.3% people of mixed race, along with about 87% of the people who identify as white. Yeah, I point out that in Oak Grove, in our schools, in Riverside, 62% of students identify as white, and in Oak Grove School, 71%, leading to the conclusion that younger people coming into the area are more diverse. So the Oak Grove Community Council membership is mostly white. So why do you think that is the case? I will point out another question just to give people an opportunity to think about that question or another, which is number 5. Greg, if you have that.
I can answer that first question. It's because we're older. And I think it's the younger people are coming in.
Is that Nate speaking?
This is Gene Fifield speaking.
Okay.
I
saw that Nate's. Go ahead.
So I was just saying that one of the reasons that the community council is mostly white, it's because we're older. We don't really have a bunch of younger people here. And so I'm not sure older people of color are moving into the other factor is maybe they don't feel included in community council, they don't have the network or other things like that. I don't know. What do other people think?
I think that's a good reflection on that.
I spoke to someone. No, I'm not. I spoke with somebody. I spoke to somebody before, and somebody, I don't remember who it was, but they said, somebody told me that Black people are more comfortable being around people of themselves because either one reason or another, you know, they're, you know, who knows, they just feel more comfortable being around each other and trying to like integrate or be included in a white setting, because they'll probably have to face all these racial injustices or these non-verbal racial clues that doctor was talking about. But I do want to, one thing I do want to say is I don't agree with what she says. You know, people go around and they're trying to find a place to live. They don't necessarily think about who's there. They find what's, you know, what's convenient or inexpensive. If I was looking for a house, it would be where it was the most, you know, affordable place to live, such and such things. I don't really agree that, yeah, I'm just going to go, you know, I'm just going to live somewhere just because there's no Black people.
This morning, but we didn't talk.
I don't agree with that.
Okay. I want to comment on the point because it was brought up by a couple of people that it is in fact difficult when a system is already set out and the leadership already reflects solidly one race. It makes it very complicated for people to come and join. So that's just a part of racial training. If you want to be diverse, your leadership needs to reflect what you would like to have. So if your leadership is all older white people, that's the majority of whom you will attract in, and it makes it uncomfortable, as the lady pointed out. I'm sorry, I can't see your name, but that is true. There was someone else that had a hand up.
Carolyn had her hand raised.
Okay.
Oh, hi. Is it my turn?
Yes, go ahead, Nate.
Oh, my name is Nate. I've been living in Oak Grove since November. I lived in Portland for 20 years, and I rented apartments the entire time in Portland. And I was never drawn to any community meetings. I think mostly because I wasn't a homeowner. And now that I own a home and I know I'm going to be here for possibly the rest of my life, I want to be active with these sort of things. And I wonder if you want to bring in more people of color where people are renting might be an option.
Okay, so you were cutting out a little bit in that. I think I understood what you were saying is that being part of a neighborhood association or a CPO in this case is more attractive to people that already own property in the area. Is that correct, Nate? Yes?
Certainly, yes, that's correct.
Okay. I will agree with that. Is there anyone else that has a comment they would like to make?
Marilyn.
Oops, sorry about that. With regards to with regards to the comment about people looking for checking racial breakdowns of neighborhoods that they're moving in, I think we should.
Rick is not going to be able to do blueprint pictures tomorrow.
I think we should remember that West Lynn explicitly prohibited Black people from buying property in the not too distant past. So I think it is important to think about, I mean, people, if they're going to be homeowners, they do want to know who lives in their neighborhood. That's all.
Maybe we can hear from Jim at this point regarding his comment to us at the board meeting?
Oh, I just spoke, we had some covenants when we bought our house 10 years ago. In the covenants, which was part of the contract, it took about an hour to read, and my partner read the whole thing, and she saw that where we live, although the covenants are no longer enforceable or no longer standing because the state laws have superseded them, but it said you weren't allowed to sell your house to a Negro, Chinese, Japanese, Asians, and this was not that long ago. What upsets me more is that it still remains in the contracts. And if some of you have an opportunity to look at your contract, you'll see many people will notice that in your contract it has references similar to, I don't know if they'd be exactly the same, but they would be similar. And that's kind of frightening.
Okay. And again, it goes back drawing, I've just kind of circled some of the things that people have been saying. If there's already a community of one race, it's very complicated for single people of another race to try to join in or to try to become part. And we, in fact, in our area do have a history of excluding people of color into our neighborhoods, which are established. So that's a complicating factor and part of our history here, not just in Oak Grove, but in the state of Oregon. Are there other comments that?
I'll say what I've said before is, well, of course, we're mostly white membership because we're mostly white community. But the question to me is wider than just trying to get folks that are people of color. It's trying to get more diverse, and we have, if we want to get that, we have to reach out in different places, because we're like the termite inspectors or something that just shine the flashlight in a specific area, and we do it because we're comfortable there. So if we want to get more people, including people of color, we have to be more interesting, and we have to have more issues that are of interest to the people to come, other than primarily land use issues.
We had another question that said, Dr. D'Angelo underscores that being a racist is not about being a bad person, and that people are capable of becoming anti-racist. So what do you think of that? Anybody have a thought about this part?
Eleanor has her hand up.
Okay, Eleanor.
I had my hand up not about that question. I put my hand up before you asked that particular
That's okay.
question, right? I wanted to go back to what Greg was saying. It's one of those issues for the community council. Part of it is, how is it that we are of interest, to more people in the community? We've long spoken. I mean, Thelma, I know, was instrumental years ago at how to boost the membership in the organization. And part of that is how are we relevant? How is the Oak Grove Community Council relevant to the community members who are here, whatever race they may be, and how are we effective? So part of it is how can we be relevant with the effectiveness that we're constricted by the process of being a CPO, by being an unrecognized, recognized entity of the county that really we have responsibility but no authority. So it's one of those great things of how is it that the community council can advocate for itself and for the community members who are here. And it's been a long issue, and it's a fascinating one. And I really appreciate the idea of inclusion of greater diversity in that way, of more renters, of different age groups. How are we involved with schools? Where are the places that we can reach out, maybe not to individuals, but to groups, PTAs, something like that, of how the CPO can be relevant to greater already engaged groups within the community.
Well, and here's another question that just before we kind of tie this part of our meeting up, is there anything, no matter how small, that that any one of you might be willing to do, to commit to doing, to help make Oak Grove a more inclusive community?
Is that Oak Grove or Oak Grove Community Council?
All of the
Well,
above.
let's speak to either one. I mean, let's look at either one of those. But the Oak Grove Community Council is, I mean, it's both things. I mean, we would like to be reflecting our community, but you could focus either way, Greg.
Well, I'll take a quick stab at it because I think we can't do much for the Oak Grove community as a whole, except through the vehicle we have right now, which is the Oak Grove Community Council. And if we want to make that more inclusive, we have to reach out to places that we haven't been reaching out. We need to put our signs in places that we haven't put our signs. We need to use social media or things like that to be able to reach out to folks that are that don't normally that aren't on our mailing list. And if we do that, then we can possibly do something which is larger than our scope and really not within our grasp, but it's a little bit that we can do. We can do stuff within the community council, but not necessarily the community.
Okay. Are there other members of the community that would like to add a comment in at this point about the topic generally, or and I'm gonna look to people that haven't spoken at all and see if there's anybody that would like to make a comment. Gwen has a, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, I haven't spoken before, so I don't know if this is working. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
So I'm thinking, in addition to reaching out to other things, I think it might behoove the council to think about the standards and the motions that we are working towards, and to what extent those continue with a racist heritage without our even knowing about it. So it's something I think we can think about as we're doing the work that we're already doing, which is really based on ownership and land use and like that.
Thank you. Joseph, any comments that you would like to make here as we're...
I just want to call attention first that we have Eleanor and Marilyn both with hands up right now.
Okay.
I think Eleanor was first.
I just have a thought of, on the agendas that are sent out or on the website, could it be something as simple as, putting some sort of statement saying, we seek to be inclusive and provide a safe place for people to come and participate. I mean, that if we at least call it out, or even saying like, we're a predominantly white community and we'd really, we're really welcoming people of color to come participate in our meetings. I mean, be overt about the invitation. I mean, Valerie, I really appreciate your comment of, we're all white. It's kind of tricky to like be the one person of color who comes in and feels comfortable. So how is it that we can do something that would show that we are welcoming and considering and filled with consideration about these issues? Something. How do we do that overtly?
I see that. Where are the hands up? There's
Marilyn. And then
I live at Roseville, and we've had a number of conversations about this. And it's highly unlikely that just putting the word out and inviting people of color to join an all-white community, highly unlikely that that invitation would be accepted. Rather, maybe we should think about becoming allies, about becoming present and visual in support of the issues that are happening. Maybe I don't know the council real well, but if we had a group of members out on McLaughlin or doing something specific in support of people of color, that would make a statement, an important statement, and then we have to keep doing it, and we have to keep educating ourselves, having conversations like this.
Thank you. And we have Pam and Rich both have their hands up.
and so does Jean.
Pam, did you want to unmute and speak?
I'm now unmuted, and I just wanted to say that emphasizing that the meetings, it's a small thing, or on Zoom, it makes them very accessible and kind of non-threatening. So.
Good. All right. Well, thank you for making that comment. I think you're right. Unless you're scared of technology, which, you know, sometimes my heart beats very hard about these things. And Rich, you?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes. Oops, you muted yourself again. There you go.
Okay, in Pennsylvania, I was on the school board of the third largest city. We had a very large Latino population. And my experience was, part of it I wrote and you can read in the chat, but what we need is for us as a group to go to people's other groups, not expect people to come to us. That's the only way it's going to work. From my own experience, there are lots of people who have not been in that power role, in that part of the majority role. It doesn't even occur to them culturally that they should do it. And I use the example of and this was what people told me. They said, I would just as soon go to the pastor at a church and tell them how to run the church. It's just like, what? You know, but when we would outreach by going, you know, representing who we were to, you know, organizations and groups and parties and things like that, then we found that people began to understand us and understand that they could be a part with us in helping to do the things in the community. And so it's not just being inclusive, it's going out to other groups, not just extending the invitation. That's for me.
Well, thank you. I just will reiterate in some of the work that I have done in my life. One of the cultural perspectives is that, you know, some cultures are volunteers and some cultures wait to be asked. So the white culture is a volunteer culture and other cultures don't necessarily do the same thing. And so we do have to do some reaching out. And one other thought that I just want to put out before we pull this part of the meeting to a close is just that there is a strong evidence that your leadership has to reflect what you want. And institutions, including the Oak Grove Community Council, is set up institutionally to replicate itself. So you need to come to 5 meetings in 12 months, and you also need to have been a member, a voting member for a year or so in order to even be asked to be on the council. So in order to be diverse, sometimes you have to make changes that where you go out and you ask people, you invite people so that you can bring in those perspectives, even though they have not already been there. So, you know, it takes some risk in leading out. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting back over to Joseph and let him have any final word. And thank everyone for participating, being willing to comment. And thank you, Greg. I want the applause for doing the technology, the video. I would have had a stroke when it didn't start off right away. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Valerie. And thank you, Greg. And really, thank you, everybody, for participating in this discussion. This is a really important issue. And, you know, as we really reflect on, you know, our membership as the community council, as far as who's coming to our meetings, you know, we are, you know, strikingly similar to each other. And that isn't reflective of, you know, who you see in the elementary schools and the high school in the area. And so it is important to really reflect on that and to, you know, educate ourselves and try to grow so that we can, grow as individuals and grow as a community council and be more engaging, more inclusive, more inviting. And so maybe there are some action items that can come out of this where, we have, a task force that, does outreach to other community groups or, specifically community groups serving people of color, or, there's opportunities for us, to be more engaging in the community. And so I really appreciate everyone's feedback and everyone's sincere participation in this conversation tonight. It really means a lot to us as a board and to us as a community to see everybody, really honestly coming together and reflecting on this really difficult subject to talk about. So again, thank you very sincerely for being here. With that, we don't expect that this will be the final time that we bring this issue up. We do want to, continue to look at this and continue to, see how we can be, addressing this, as an ongoing concern. And so we aren't just going to cross this off the list and say we did it and, move back on to, our traditional, issues. We need to really lean into this. So thanks everybody. Now is the LUART portion of the meeting, and this is actually going to be pretty short. There have been some LUART issues. Some land use applications have come through, but mostly what I'm going to bring up is the public hearing that should be coming up pretty soon. We have a couple of commissioners in the audience, and they might know their schedule for next month better than I do. I haven't seen this on their agenda yet, but coming up is what's been termed, the package has been termed ZDO-276, and what it is a package of zoning and development ordinance amendments, including the legalization of bakeries and brew pubs in the commercial districts that include historic downtown Oak Grove and the McLaughlin corridor, as well as some other commercial districts around the county. And this was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission at their recent meeting on July 13th. And they were unanimously supportive of including this and supporting this community's request in legalizing additional types of businesses, especially kinds that our community is asked to see here. So that's really exciting news, and we will share through our to our email list. We will let you know when we have a date on the BCC hearing to consider these amendments, so that we all have an opportunity to submit comments. And that will be the LUART update for tonight. I'd like to invite our secretary, Jan Lindstrom, who's also a member of the Concord Property and Library Planning Task Force, to give us an update on what has been transpiring with that group over the last month. And they've met several times. Jan.
It's been very exciting in the Concord Task Force of late. Some of you may have already gotten the email from us suggesting that you go on and participate in the Concord Property and Library Planning Task Force survey. Basically, the task force has been meeting, we were meeting weekly for a while and going through all of the design options. There were 7 of them for the proposed library, community center, and park on the Concord property. Out of those 7, well, first I'll start with that the task force finally voted unanimously to agree to go forward with having the library on the Concord property. And that may sound like it's already been done, but actually it hadn't. And so we actually had that vote, despite the fact that there were some people that had concerns about the seismic report on the property. The county, the planners, the architects, everybody assures us that yes, there are some issues with upgrades that have to happen to the building, but it is not anything that we cannot handle, or that is going to be so outrageously expensive that we wouldn't be able to go forward with it. So they've assured us that it's doable. It's not anything out of the ordinary compared to other similar projects. And so that was good. Now they have narrowed, through the voting, we have narrowed it down to 3 choices. The task force wanted me to let you know that of those 3 choices, number 2 is actually their favorite. They want to let you know that because they have been spending the most time paying attention to this, studying it, looking at all of the impacts, and feel that it is the best choice for everything we want within the best financial picture of the project. So I want to direct your attention to the survey. If you haven't participated yet, you can either go directly to the county and search for Concord Task Force survey, or you can just click on the link that we're going to send you. We sent it out once, but we're going to send it out again in our follow-up email. And we really, really want your community input. This has been, since I moved here, I've been working on library stuff, and I know most of the people listening to this call have either been actively waiting or participating for years for this library. So now is your chance to go on and give your feedback and get really excited about what's coming here. Because in the midst of this pandemic, we have something really great to look forward to for our community. So I want to thank the commissioners who are listening and everybody who participated from the very beginning. And participate in that survey if you can. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Jen. And now I'd like to invite Valerie, our vice chair, who is also the chair of the Park Avenue Community Project Community Advisory Committee, to give an update on that group's activities over the past month, or two, actually.
So the Park Avenue had a workshop, online workshop on June the 30th. That entire workshop was recorded, and you can go online to the county to the website, that Park Avenue, and if we can put that survey, we want both survey links up at some point. We'd like the survey both for the library, and also there is now a survey regarding the changes that alternatives in the Park Avenue area that is also online, that will be for our framework plan. And you can go online up through the first week of August and complete that survey. In particular, we would like people who live, work, own property, or regularly pass through the Park Avenue area, and that probably includes most of you. Encourage you to do the survey. We're pretty excited at the fact, the last count, there's over 150 people that have taken the time to go online. And I know it's not as glamorous or as sexy as a new library. However, it does help us think about what we want down the road in planning. So it gives you a way to input where you think there might be helpful to have bike and pedestrian connections between the trolley trail and McLaughlin Boulevard, and between Oatfield Road going down to McLaughlin as well. And it also talks about where you might like to see more housing, where you might like to see more job opportunities. So this is a framework plan, and you have it's very interactive. It will ask you questions. It doesn't take very much time to fill out. I really want to encourage people to do that. And again, if you would like to see the presentation, that's also online, so you can see the workshop as it was put together on the June the 30th. There will be another workshop that's coming up. It will be more very specifically about design and zone, and that will be sometime in September. The next meeting of the Park Avenue Community Advisory Council will be on the 12th of August. It's 6 to 8. And if you don't already have the link information to get there, let us know and we can make sure that you do.
Thanks, Valerie. We also had a request to copy and paste the link to the library survey, the Concord's property survey, into the chat window, and I suppose we could do the same with the Park Avenue survey. But we'd also recommend that you sign up your email address for our newsletter so that you can make sure that you don't miss these when we send out these notifications in the future. So I'm going to breeze through this really quick. We'll include the details for these in the follow-up email that we've been talking about already. There's right now 3 openings for community advisory boards or commissions at the county. Committee for Community Involvement, and the Hospital Facility Authority of Clackamas County are both due July 31st. And then the Committee for Leaders for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council is due on August 21st. And at this point, I'd like to ask if there are any announcements from the floor. Feel free to raise your hand in Zoom if there are. Or if you don't know how to do that, then you can unmute yourself and holler. Because I don't see anyone raising hands. So, okay, well, absent any announcements, then we will jump ahead to our upcoming schedule. And so for the foreseeable future, we are meeting over Zoom. The Rose Villa is not an option for meeting in person, even if it were allowed. And also our venue for the board meetings has been put off limits through to October at the earliest. So for the foreseeable future, at least through to the fall, we will be meeting over Zoom. And so our next full regular business meeting date is August 26th. And our upcoming board meeting will be Monday, August 3rd. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. That's our show. Thanks again so much for being here. We really appreciate having everyone take time out of this beautiful weather to join us and join in the conversation that we had tonight. So thanks everybody.
Don't
We'll see you
hang up
next month.
yet if you want the next link, because I'm just about to grab it and paste it.
Thanks, Jen. So we'll leave things up for a few minutes, and feel free to say hi or say bye on your way out or whatever, and we'll stop the recording and put together that email for the next couple of days. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Joseph. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for all your efforts.
Just want to say that I really like the Zoom meetings. I like the Zoom.
Thank you. Hey.
Although we don't get Bob's cookies.
That's true.
True.
That is
True.
a drawback.
But people with young children can participate without having to get babysitters. So that's a great thing.
That is a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just sent the Concord open house link.
And Joseph, those will be on our follow-up email?
Yes, they will.
Great.
Yes, we will, for sure.
Well, that was a great meeting, everybody. I like the conversation that happened in the beginning. I like that, I like that we're including something different before the meeting starts.
Tell me your name again, by the way.
Oh, I'm Janine, sorry.
Janine, that's right, okay. I was like, I know I wrote it down last time, but I was like, what?
Yeah, I'm sharing a Zoom with Troy.
That's all right. I'm glad you guys are there. Very cool.
And Mr. Kovar likes it that we're home too. He's our dog.
Oh, what kind?
German short-haired and hound.
Oh.
He's waiting for our attentions right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say they don't like phones, but they're not as bad with computers. They can't figure them out,
Right.
All right, I'm hanging up. Anybody else need anything?
No. Bye.
Thanks, Jen.
Good job, you guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph? And
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
During most of the meeting, I was not able to see all the participants. The drop down that I had allowed me to see quite a few people. Were there that many people who were not online, visible with a camera?
I think a lot of people had their cameras off, and that.
When Eleanor
Was that not what you're
asking
talking
a
about?
question- Well, yeah, when Eleanor was asking a question, I did not, unless I went over to the side view with a list of people, there was no real easy way for me to see most people. I just had, I would say, a half of the participants available.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. It does different things on different devices and does, you know, kind of floats the videos
when I'm in a
different.
Zoom
And,
meeting, I can see everybody. I can keep scrolling through
interesting.
all the normal pages and see up to 50 people if I want to bother. But
oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, I don't know why it would be any different for ours.
I didn't know